Welcome to Rollin' with the Punches. I'm Jessie Punch. I'm so happy you're here. My heart is very full this week, coming off of the weekend at Bristol, having my whole family with me there on Sunday, hanging out, watching the Cup Series race. It really was such a special day. Getting to have experiences like that, especially with my dad, means the world to me. I mean, clearly we share this love, this passion for racing. So to just sit down, watch a race together, talk about it, tell stories at Bristol of all places, it was an amazing Sunday. I'm very, very happy going into this week. And I will say too, I loved getting to see my dad back at the racetrack because I get to hear it all the time when I'm there. People tell me they miss him, or they ask about him, or they tell me stories about the times when he was there and all the great things he was doing for our sport. And even though I try to relay that to him, it's still not the same. I don't think it always comes through. And I know, seeing it firsthand, how difficult transitioning out of living the NASCAR lifestyle for 30 plus years can be. I mean, you miss your friends. You wonder, like, does anybody miss me? It sounds dramatic, but truly, to see my dad back at the racetrack this weekend and getting to see all these people pour back into him and tell them how much they love him and miss him and what he's done for our sport, it made me very happy, and I appreciated that a lot as well. And on top of that, our guest said something similar this week about, can you believe that people still care about, what I did 30 years ago? And my jaw just about hit the floor. Because our guest this week is Ray Evernham, NASCAR Hall of Famer, 3-time championship winning crew chief Ray Evernham. I mean, what he did for this sport is unreal. He is known for one of the best innovators when it comes to racing. What him and Jeff Gordon did together as a duo changed the trajectory of NASCAR forever. And I am not overestimating his impact when I say that. And that doesn't even scratch the surface of what Ray has done himself, just in general for motorsports. I mean, right now, he's been spearheading the efforts to bring back IROC. And in July, IROC is back. The first event is happening. I mean, seeing the way that this man continues to pour back into motorsports, and so successfully, is really, really impressive. And the fact that he made time for us was just unbelievably appreciated. So we packed our stuff up, we made our way up to his garage, and we went to Big Iron Garage, his personal shop. Chills. I can't even describe to you the way it feels walking into that place. This isn't just any race shop. I mean, Ray's a collector. We know he has an incredible car collection. But this place is unreal. You've got Richie Evans Modified sitting there in the middle, a beautiful rainbow 24 in the corner. I can't even begin to explain to you. In fact, actually, just head over to YouTube. You can see it for yourself. We tried our best to get as much video as possible, but words just can't really describe it. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So yes, I know I say it every week, but highly recommend watching this one on YouTube. Can't stress it enough. All right, that's enough from me. I'm going to stop chatting and let you guys get to know Ray Evernham. I don't even know how to properly introduce you. I guess we'll go the NASCAR route and we'll say NASCAR Championship Crew Chief. Hall of Famer, I think, is where you start in that. Jack of all trades, quite literally one of the greatest of all time, Ray Evernham. Welcome to Rollin' with the Punches.
Oh, thanks. You could have just said, hey, friend of my dad's. You were just a little kid, but...
hey, Ray.
Yeah, it's been a good ride.
You are much more than that. And thank you for having us here. This place is incredible. I was just telling the guys when we got set up, I've been in a race shop or two in my day. I've seen around. Walking into this place, though, it took my breath away. Like, I don't know if it's how you have some gorgeous cars in here, if it's seeing some of the IROC cars, if it's just, this alone is like a museum. This shop is absolutely incredible.
Well, it's a lot of, my collection's very eclectic like me. I just love everything. Because then we've got everything from modifieds to little H modified cars to road race cars to IROC. But, IROC was my passion. Without that time of my life, I would have never got here. But, sprint cars and kiddie cars, and there's just something like when you're racing 50 years, you can gain a lot of junk.
Junk is a very silly way to put this incredible collection. But I think you hit it right there. It was something about the IROC cars. I mean, don't get me wrong, the rest of your collection is spectacular. But getting to walk in here and feel like, oh, it's it really is here. I mean, I saw it for the first time. I've seen it. It's not just in write-ups. IROC is back. And we're only a few months away now from the official start. For anyone who isn't familiar with the resurgence of IROC and with the means with which you've brought it back, what does this IROC reunion return look like here next month?
Well, right now it's all historic-based stuff. We're using original cars. We're bringing some of the original drivers, and we're actually selling and maintaining some of the original cars to guys that do the historic racing, so they can race with the original IROC drivers. And we've got every generation of IROC car here right now, except for a Porsche. We have friends that have Porsches, but those things are really rare and untouchable. But we do have two of those coming out to our event at Laguna Seca, which is, again, to be part of the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunions. Incredible. But when you look at IROC and you look at the 33 years, I think, that they ran, it's a series that has an incredible history that no other series has, because they took Formula One, sports car, IndyCar, NASCAR, road race, whatever guys against themselves and went, to find out who was truly the best. And right now, if you took like Verstappen and Kyle Larson and people like that and do it, and you just can't do it in today's world. So some of the cars that we have here were driven by AJ Foyt, Bobby Unser, Brian Redmond, Jody Schettker, Emerson Fittipaldi. You look at the list of who in the early days drove, and then as they went on into the 80s, the list and the cars that drove the Camaros and the Avengers, and it just goes on and on and on. So that type of history, I think, is really unique to motorsports.
Well, and if there's anybody that knows that era and knows IROC, it's you. I mean, that's where you said a minute ago you got your start when you were 20, 25, 26. Is that about right?
I think I have to look back. So I started there in December of '83. So that would have made me 25. But
building race cars, right?
Well, I actually was racing modifieds at Wall Stadium, and we had a really good year. We had a couple years where we didn't do so well, and then we had a couple good years in a row, and people felt like, hey, Ray's got a shot at winning the Wall Stadium Championship, and we had some good runs outside at Martinsville and places like that, and I decided that, if I was ever going to go anywhere, I needed to do something else. So a job opening came up at IROC, and I just walked in there and asked for a job. And Jay Signori's wife, Barbara, who was like a mom to me, she hired me, and they sent me immediately to Banjo Matthews. And I stayed down at Banjo Matthews' place for 3 or 4 weeks, and actually used to eat with Banjo and Penny, and got to know a lot of the guys, and then stayed at Banjo's house a little bit and helped build the first IROC. And then it went on from there.
That's incredible. And I actually went back and listened to your interview on the Dale Jr. podcast, the Dale Jr. Download, back from 25 years ago now, which I couldn't believe it had been that long. But in that interview, you made a point to say that you would not have had the career that you had if it weren't for having the opportunity that you had with IROC. And then in that same conversation, hearing you talk about, now at the time we were talking about SRX, but just the idea of the possibility of bringing something back that honored these greats, honored motorsports, honored history in IROC, and hearing the way you talked about that, like it could be something. And now here we are 5 years later to know we're just a few weeks away from seeing that dream become a reality. It makes me want to ask, when you were in your mid-20s, would you have ever imagined you've been here? But then again, 5 years ago, would you have ever imagined that we'd be doing this?
No, it's the goal is to get it going, increase the notoriety, get people involved. Maybe a manufacturer wants to come back and bring the real IROC series back. That's my dream. There's a lot of financial and political steps that have to happen in between making that, and who knows if it can ever really happen. I felt like we had a good plan with SRX. We had some good things going on, but business-wise, it didn't work out. It's still got to make business sense too. And I do think that people would think, could they really like to take the F1 guys now that are good and race against Kyle Larson, some of our IndyCar guys now? Like, wouldn't that be really cool again? How we could put that together, again, a lot harder. But at least getting back to history about what IROC was, IROC is like a motorsports history lesson in itself, because of where it started in 73 with the Porsches, with Fulmer and Donahue and guys like that, and what Mr. Penske and his partners did. And Jay Signori, who is my mentor, who is without a doubt the guy that taught me the most in my life when it came to preparing race cars and whatnot. He has I call it the Signori tree. But if you look at the people that have gone through Penske Racing and Hendrick Motorsports and places like that have really worked under Jay's umbrella, they've won a lot of races and championships. So IROC was probably, even though I didn't go to college, IROC was probably the best college I could have gone to.
Yeah, I think you learned a lot more working with the people that you worked with at IROC. I don't think any of those college professors have the accolades that those IROC drivers had. I mean, to that point, you look at the list of drivers that you worked with just in IROC alone, and at the time, they were already the greats. Mm-hmm. But now, as time's passed, I mean, their legacies have only grown. And it's the same way when you look at what you did in NASCAR. I mean, the way that you and Jeff teamed up, we didn't know at the time what you guys were going to do, but you also were working under the great of Rick Hendrick, mm-hmm. and learning from so many people that you knew what you had, and then now you see how time has passed and how that legacy has really only grown.
Well, sometimes you really, again, it's fun and it's innocent when you don't know how much you don't know, because then you have no expectation, so
that's fair.
The understanding, when I went from short track racing, I had some great heroes there that I really thought a lot of too. Guys like Gil Hearn and Tony Siscone, guys that I raced against every week at Wall, and some of the other dirt guys, Billy Pouch, that I watched race. But Roger Penske told me that the championship drivers, the guys, they look out of a bigger windshield, and what he meant by that was they just see more. Like, they see more. They understand more, and being around that type of person helps you in a lot of ways. And whether that's, football, baseball, TV, whatever you want to do, if you get around a mentor that's really great, they do look at things differently. And I remember spending time with like Mario Andretti and talking about cars, and him asking me questions, and just so competitive about what he wanted to do and how he wanted the car. AJ Foyt, same way. Ellenser Jr., like all of those guys that you look at that have made those accomplishments, they just have a different sense of competition than everybody else. They look past the surface details and dig down for that little bit of extra, and it really changed the way I thought about my life and my career. Because I was like, wait a minute, I got to step up a good bit. I'm not even close to where these guys are. And, it rubbed off on me management-wise and preparing cars and things like that. But unfortunately, the driving talent didn't wear off on me, but, it still did okay.
I am a huge Alan Kulwicki fan. Now, being a huge Alan Kulwicki fan is also understanding that working for and with Alan mm-hmm. Kulwicki was not always the easiest thing to do, but an incredibly knowledgeable person. Mm-hmm. I've had the opportunity to talk to a couple of the different Kulwickyites, and they've just expressed the things they've learned from him and the way they kind of had to tiptoe around learning from him. And now I know you were really young and coming into the industry, or into that area of the industry at that time. What was it like working for Alan? Were there things you learned from him that you carried with you and things you maybe left behind?
Alan and I didn't get along, so I wasn't there that long. You evolve, right? You look back on the things that you wish you would have said, or things that were done different. I do a lot of reading. My son is on the autism spectrum, so I read a lot about how brain works, and there's mindsets and how people think differently about other people. So I think I would have been a little bit more understanding of Alan. Alan was absolutely one of the smartest people I ever worked with. He could do things in a race car. He could crew chief and figure his fuel mileage and tire. He was amazing. But personality-wise, it just didn't fit with he and I. To the point where we were probably yelling at each other the first couple of days I was there. And I don't know that. I don't know that he meant anything by it. It was just the way he was and the way that I was. I think if we could have gotten along, probably could have done really well together. But we both did the same thing. He had his ideas, I had my ideas, and we were both pretty stubborn. Mm-hmm. But it was the experience. What that did for me, honestly, again, so I need to go back and tell a little bit. When I left Iraq, I was Iraq test driver. I left Iraq and put a whole bunch of stuff together, and I was going to be a race car driver. So kick off 1991, win opening night at Wall, run second at Flemington. I got a midget ride, whatever. Boom, get hurt at Flemington, and basically at that point struggled for a while after that. But my career's over, and head injury, and then
that's what ultimately led you to meet Jeff,
to meet
right?
Jeff, yeah,
okay.
yeah. I was out of the car and worked with Jeff a little bit. But when I came down to North Carolina, I went straight to Cup, which was a mistake. And went to a good Cup team like Allen's, and I wasn't prepared enough for all of those things. And Allen made me feel all of a sudden like I wasn't good enough or smart enough, and I took that like a personal challenge, like I'm going to show you, And then went back to Bill Davis, or went to Bill Davis's from Ford, and then really learned a lot. So sometimes you think you're ready, but you're not, and then something happens, and you've got to learn from that. And I talk a lot in my book about evolution. You've got to keep evolving, and that I took Allen. That day we had the argument whether he fired me or I quit or whatever. It was fun for AJ Foyt to watch.
Yeah, kind of thing.
AJ Foyt watched us kind of shaking each other by the collar and dancing around outside the truck, yelling and screaming. But I took that as a personal challenge. Like, no, I am good enough, and I'm going to prove it to you.
I really appreciate that answer and the honesty in that answer, both on Allen's part, because one, you're not the first person to say that Allen wasn't the very easiest person to work with, but two, for you to have that awareness to grow and say, I needed time to understand how everybody else's brain works. That says so much about you as a person. I mean, hey, we have the entire stat list of everything you've done on the racetrack, but who you are off of the racetrack, you just speaking that alone, I think, says a lot about you and your personality. And it's like you said, this evolution is being willing to grow both as a person and being willing to better, maybe in a way, have to humble yourself in scenarios to better understand the people around you. But it's because you have that mentality and that outlook on life that then in turn makes you, I have to believe, so good at what you do. That's part of what makes you go so good, because you're this sponge and you're willing to meet people where they are. And I lay all that out because it brings me to you meeting Jeff Gordon. Mm-hmm. And you guys, I have to ask, because it's in my mental picture here is, I cover the modifieds. I cover the tour. I'm on the tour. I love the modifieds. I've been to Wall Stadium. I love the modified series so much. Jeff Gordon, California boy, to me, does not scream modifieds. And you come up through such a different background, maybe perspective of racing. What was your first thought when you met Mr. Hollywood, this young Jeff Gordon kid, and was expected on top of that to work with him?
Even though he didn't run modifieds, he ran a lot of open wheel, like the Sprints, the USAC Silver Crown cars. USAC Silver Crown cars, I mean, it's a modified with, modified's one of those with a body on it. So,
but do they fight like they do in the modifieds?
Everybody fights, right?
Oh, okay,
Even Jeff Gordon. I've had to get him a couple of times. He's a little scrappy dude there, we call him, because I tell people all the time, like, don't mess with him. Jeff Gordon will hit you. They're like, no, I'm telling Jeff Gordon will fight with you before Ray Evernham will. Jeff's not afraid to or he didn't used to be. But so the open wheel background, I watched him, and I always respected. What he could do in midget sprints, and we got invited to do a little thing together. Was friends with Leo Jackson before he passed away, and Harry Ganton and those guys through my Iraq connections. Andy Petrie, and Andy Petrie said, "Hey, will you come and help us? I know that you're running your own deal, but will you come and help us with this Gordon kid?" And went down there, and the first time I met him. He was a kid, right? And I always tell that story about everybody used to have those carbon fiber Simpson briefcases.
Oh, yeah.
So I had mine, open up mine, take up my notebook and whatever. He opens up his. There's like a Open Wheel magazine, a Nintendo Game Boy, a can of peanuts, so he gets his pen and his paper out finally. But, he was so mature around the car. When I first met him, it was crazy. When we went to Charlotte, the first time we ever worked together, I asked Chuck Bound to shake down the car because I didn't know much about it. We had one car. It was a Pontiac with a Chevy motor at that time, which, they were down on power to the Pontiacs. We had like 4 spare tires and wheels. We had borrowed everything else. We borrowed. They used to call we called it Borrow It All Racing because Steve Barkdahl was putting it together. So, and Steve was, the Barkdahls were very good too, Jeff and I both. But we called it Borrow It All Racing, and we were at Charlotte, and I mean Davey Allison was there, Chuck Bound, the top BGN guys at that time. And Chuck Bound shakes the car down and says, no, it's good. Go ahead and let him go out there. And Jeff's talked to him about how to get down into the hump, get into one and whatnot. And in 2 sessions, Jeff was actually going faster in the car than Chuck. And just talking to Jeff on the radio and listening to his comments about the car, I was like, there's no way that can be experience. He's too young, and he's really only driven one of these cars. He had such an incredible feel for the race car, and he had the ability to break down what he was feeling so easily, to make me understand it. Like I always tell everybody, like if you can't crew chief for Jeff Gordon, you probably shouldn't have a toolbox because he gives you the answers. Now maybe they do that with a computer or whatever. Now I don't know, but back then, he had a really uncanny ability to pick out exactly what the car was doing. Didn't know how to fix it. I mean, he would never want to give Jeff a wrench. I mean, he didn't know the difference between a track bar and a sway bar at that time, but he could tell you.
Not his job.
Not his job.
Not his job.
And he could tell you, and we just hit it off immediately that first time, and we've been like brothers ever since.
Can you work with any other drivers? Can you think of any other drivers that has that same natural ability to just have that feel in the race car?
I can tell you there's a couple of guys that I've always thought the world of. Alan Sir Jr. is an amazing race car driver. Probably not as technical with the car as Jeff was, but just drive the heck out of it. And Bill Elliott could have easily been a jet fighter pilot. Bill is really good with motors and gears and thinking, where Jeff would tell you things about where the weight's transferring. Like he'd be so specific. I've always said, look, there's 2 guys that I've worked with that if I took a silver dollar and laid it on the track at Daytona, they could both find it and hit it. Bill could tell you if it was heads up. Jeff would stop, pick it up, and invest it, but Bill, that kind of detail, those guys are just in a different league. They're that comfortable in their environment, if that makes sense. Remember when we were winning all that stuff in the 90s, so were the Chicago Bulls. And everybody's like, well, Jordan, this and that, what makes them different. And, I remember, this is how great my sports feel is, the coach of the Chicago Bulls at that time. He said, Michael has a different sense of time than we do. And that made a lot of sense because you think you're going around the track at 200 miles an hour. I'm just trying not to crash and save my life, right?
No joke.
These guys are just so comfortable in that time and that speed that they're picking apart stuff. And again, Jeff was always like that. So Jeff would be going around the track sometimes and go, watch this. Like, watch what? And then he'd set up a pass and go by. Or he'd pick out somebody in the stands. He goes, do you see that guy giving me the finger? I'm like,
kind of busy.
What are you talking about? He goes, the guy. And I'm like, pay attention to what you're doing. They're just so comfortable in the environment.
Amazing.
I guess, we were somewhere and every time you went off corner of Texas or somewhere, guys flipping them off. And, I said, flip them off back, but pay attention.
Yeah. That's incredible. Wow, to have that kind of ability is
just
amazing.
Comfortable.
And to think back too, you really were there with Jeff from the start of this NASCAR career. Both of you guys, rookies, going into this Cup. Rookies, you weren't even a crew chief. And Mr. Hendrick looks at you and says, you're on top of the box?
Yeah,
what do you remember from that?
That was, first, Jeff and I, his first ever NASCAR race was Rockingham. And we went there and sat on the pole sat on outside pole and then wrecked in the race. But people were like, who the heck are these guys? Again, and it was, it was neat. But I went back home to New Jersey to race, and Jeff and I stayed friends. And then when I got hurt, we really stayed in contact. And he was driving for Bill Davis at that time, and Bill didn't really have the funding to bring me down. So went to Allen, and then finally, after, got fired, quit, whatever, go back to that story, I don't know. But Ford put me over at Bill Davis's, and immediately, first week together, we won the pole, and we missed a race setup. And then I think by the third week, it was Atlanta, and we went and won Atlanta. And story goes, Mr. Hendrick saw Jeff, and Jeff had an opportunity to drive for some other Ford owners that didn't want him to pick as crew chief. So he said to Rick Hendrick, I got this guy I want to bring with me. And of course, Rick is like, yeah, whatever you want to do. So I didn't know I was going to be the crew chief. I thought I was going to be the chassis guy because I liked building suspension and setting the car up. That was my thing. I'm not trying to figure race strategy, pit stops, all that stuff. I want to build a good car.
So you didn't know that he was out there petitioning for you and turning down offers to have you on the box?
I did not know. I know that he specifically turned down one offer because they told him he couldn't bring me.
And you didn't even know this was happening?
No, not till after. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, with Rick cracks me up still, we talk about to this day. I said, hey, yeah, I'd love to come over. But I said, if it were me, I'd hire Andy Petrie to be the crew chief because, I just thought Andy, great crew chief and more experience than me. And I could work with Andy. We were friends, right? So I could work with Andy. And he's like, no, Jeff wants you to be the crew chief. I said, I really don't want to be the crew chief. I don't have enough experience. I've never really crew chiefed. I'm not even the crew chief on the Busch car. I'm like one of the mechanics.
Not to mention, this guy also has no experience, so you're kind of,
And, you go in there, and at Hendrick at that time, it was like, Waddell Wilson, Harry Hyde. And I'm like, yeah, no, Ray Evernham. People are like, hey, these cars have fenders. Your cars don't have fenders. So we went back and forth, and Rick said, look, you're going to be the crew chief. It's the only job that I got for you. He was kidding me, but he said, I'll make sure to surround you with good people. And, he saw a lot more in the combination of Jeff and I and our chemistry. I think then he had more confidence in me than I had in myself.
So then what was it about Mr. Hendrick that gave you the confidence to say, okay, if you think I'm ready, then I'm ready. I'll do it for you.
Well, when you have somebody like that believes in you, you don't want to let them down. Right? So I worked really hard to understand. I watched videos. I read books. I spent as much time wind tunnel and aerodynamics. You got to remember, most of my life, we didn't even have fenders, right? And how effective that was. And then I always felt like I was pretty good with the car. And I felt like he allowed me to have a lot of input into how our cars were built. And I think that changed some of the thought process at Hendrick. But the fact that he supported me just made me want to work harder, that I didn't want to let him down. I always felt every day when I went to work at Hendrick, I had the best team, I had the best owner, and I had the best driver. So, if we didn't win, it was on me.
You mentioned to him seeing something in you and Jeff together before you guys were able to see it. And it's one thing to put two talented people together, but that doesn't always create the magic that you guys were able to make. What was it about the two of you that complemented each other so well? And was it a struggle to get there, or was it natural?
It's natural. And I always, there's certain people that you have relationships with that I say everything goes back to trust, honesty, and respect, right? Whether that's teammate, whether it's your husband, wife, partner, whatever it is, trust, honesty, and respect. And Jeff and I we've just always had that naturally. And, when I talked about evolving and trying to understand how people think, and, that's difficult with some people. And it's a learned exercise. You really got to think about it. Never really had to do that with Jeff. He knows what he does. I know what I do. And we clicked, and we really didn't let our own egos ever get between us. We let some other people's egos get between us, but today we still don't have a problem. I was texting him back and forth about a car I'm getting ready for him and whatever. on a seat deal and whatever, and it's important. And he's like, look, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. Let's just figure it out, because we couldn't get what he wanted. And we've always had that kind of trust. And if he said to me, I really don't want to do that, I want you to take the roof off that car and weld it on upside down, I go, okay. I mean, yeah, if that's what you want, that's just what we do.
That's a special kind of friendship, really. Not everybody has that. And now for you guys to still have the relationship like you have today, to work together at that, but also then have the time to spend with each other away from work and just be friends. And I'm sure, did your families get to spend time together? What's that like
They do
now?
now more than ever. Jeff has, I love Ingrid. She's been really good for Jeff, and Ella and Leo, they're getting older. Ella's really competitive on the track stuff, and Leo is I think he's gotten into tennis and whatnot lately. But Leo comes camping with us sometimes. Like, we have property up in Wilkesboro, and Jeff and I will camp together up there, and Leo comes and drives the thing. So it's good that we're getting to spend social time together that we didn't in the past. We've known each other 35 years. 35
Wow.
years. So that it's good.
It's a lot of dirt on each other.
I look at him like he's my little brother. And my wife Erin says, you two are just like, when we get together, they say we're trouble. We get going, but that relationship is. We can go back to 1990s immediately. Of course, we always get confused on parts of stories, because now I can't remember, he can't remember, type thing. But
you have to fill in the holes for each other, kind of deal. Yeah,
and even then we're wrong.
Yeah, make it up a little bit as you go. It's fine.
Well, that's what we said. Who's going to prove us?
Exactly.
What was funny, I've recently got to know Tim Cindric and Elio Castroneves, and my wife and I sat with them at dinner at Amelia, and she said, they're like you and Jeff. Like, it sounded just like you and Jeff. And if you look at Tim Cindric and Elio Castroneves' record together as crew chief or team strategist, or whatever they call those guys, it's pretty good. And you think, okay, that chemistry means sometimes more than a fast car.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was getting at when I say you can have all the talent in the world and two incredibly talented people, but it's the ability to work together that really is it's magic. I mean, that's the only word I can think of. Do you see anyone today that has that potential? Any driver, crew chief pairings? And while I put you on the spot there a little bit, I'll let you think and preface this by saying I'm compiling a list of something called your next favorite driver, because
Gotcha.
there are a million drivers in this world, and I want to tell everybody's story. And I think that if you tell me that you can't find a favorite driver, I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and here's a list. And to hear from people like you or Ron Hornaday, who could be your next favorite driver, I think is special. So now that I've prefaced that, driver, crew chief, who do you think we should keep an eye on?
It's hard because, again, what builds performance has changed. And because of the technology, the biggest thing that's changed in our sport are the tools, right? So the tools we had involved a lot of conversation and compromise and faith. The tools they have now are pretty black and white and tell a different story. So I don't know. I think that it's important that ultimately the two guys, or a girl and a guy, that you have to respect each other, and you have to have faith. Like, okay, that's his job. If he believes in me, he's got to know that I'm going to do what he needs, even if it's not what I think is right. Because most people will tell you that, if you give race drivers what they need, they're going to figure out a way to go fast with it. As soon as you give them something they don't need, they're not going to try as hard. Probably shouldn't say that, but that I keep going back to that trust and honesty and respect, and you call it that faith. I'll tell you a little story about faith. All right, do you know the Flying Walenda family? The tightrope walk, the guys who walk across Niagara Falls. Well, the grandfather, he would push a wheelbarrow across the falls. Wow. And one day it was windy, and the promoter wanted him to go, and there were people waiting, and he didn't really want to go because it was a little bit windy. So he said, and the promoter said, "Look, man, you can make it." And Walenda said, "You think I can make it?" He goes, "Yeah, it's good. We need to go." He said, "You have faith I can make it?" And he said, "I do have faith in you." He said, "Get in the wheelbarrow." That's that's the. Will you get in the wheelbarrow? And
Wow.
I think the driver needs to know the crew chiefs would get in the wheelbarrow for him, and vice versa. And that's. I think it's important. I really like Cliff Daniels and his combination with with Kyle Larson, Rudy Frugel. I like the way that they handle their stuff. I think Rick Hendrick has a really good culture over there for grooming crew chiefs in the right spot. But there's a ton of guys out there. Paul Wolf is probably one of the best up and down pit road. But again, it's got to come back to what they really believe in the driver. And I'm rambling, but it's hard with today's tools.
No,
it's hard.
To your point about that, you're absolutely right. You hear it from drivers all the time about just how the dynamic of finding success has changed drastically, especially just in the last few years with this next gen car. And it makes me think about your career, and so much of not just your success, but the legacy that you've left was your ability to, like you said, play the game, play the sport, push the limits, right? Like if you got a call from NASCAR on Monday morning, it's a bad thing, but internally there's also it's also a good thing, because they're telling you, like, you're like, okay, I've done something right. Like if they're having to make new rules because of what you were able to figure out with that race car, you're moving the needle. And to your point about things changing, it just makes you wonder if that kind of legacy and change is still possible to do on top of the box with the way things have changed now.
I don't know, but there'll be some new kind of legacy.
For sure.
Look, the world evolves, and when you involve a mechanical thing, it goes exponentially. Because, as I said, everything that we're doing now with the tools and the math and we used to have to do that all by hand. We had all the caution history and we had all that stuff. Yeah, and it was all on a chart by
That's
hand.
my worst nightmare. Yeah. That sounds. Can you imagine? Of course you can imagine. Are you kidding me? One gust of wind and everything. All your notes are everywhere.
Well,
I can't even wrap my brain around that.
Then you'd have to dig in. You just wouldn't have to hit escape F4 or whatever, and everything pops back up. So I hope that the human element, it still is the dominant thing in our sport. Yeah. And it's just harder and harder because the human element is driving the technology.
I think, though, I will say it goes back to what we were just talking about a moment ago with that teamwork, and that is where we're at a time where I think that's going to play more into finding success, is that ability to work together seamlessly as a team, not just the crew chief and the driver, but the team as a whole. And not to get too down the rabbit hole with current racing, but that 24 scheme this year with the flames on the side of it, what do you think about that thing?
I think it's cool, man. To me, I'd like to see it with the rainbow. I didn't work. Everybody goes, "Oh, do you think?" I was like, "Wait a minute, I didn't work on the flame car. I work on the rainbow car." So,
is it weird to think that they're already kind of like running these schemes that are hitting these nostalgic areas of your life?
It's weird. Jeff and I had 350 diecast to sign yesterday, and we were at Hendrick, and I looked at him and I said, "Can you believe people even care about something we did 30 years ago?" And it's amazing. It's fun. It is really flattering. But Jeff and I haven't been together since 1999, and people still, and we were only together for 7 years. Not a lot of people know that, right? 6.5 seasons really, and people still look at us like, with the same level as they do with Petty and Inman, who are the greatest, or Leonard Wood, but combinations, you think, wow, we were together that long, but we had a good run while we were together.
What you managed to do in those 7 years was life-changing for the sport, really. I mean, it changed the history and the trajectory of our sport. But it is funny to have you sit here, though, and say, I can't believe people still care about that.
Yeah.
Because, Ray, you alone, it would be a shame for me to even sit here and spend this whole time talking to you just about Jeff, because
But you were like
you said,
-5 when that happened.
I was younger. I will say that. Yes. No, you're right. But since I have been alive, what you've done just alone, not as a crew chief, but even behind the wheel, talking about the accomplishment of winning at Pikes Peak, that is more to do for someone to do that in a lifetime is a lifetime accomplishment, and that is one piece of your resume. Okay, let me stop fangirling for a second and bring us back down. Question number one is, you've spent so much time being in drivers' ears, calming them down, being the voice of reason, talking them through, and now you're the guy that's about to take on Pikes Peak. What is going through your mind? How are you feeling in that moment?
I always felt like I had something to prove for myself. I drove a sprint car for the first time at 52 years old, and we ended up winning a decent amount of sprint car races. And I always wanted to drive dirt, but your body gets beat up pretty good, and the last thing I need to be doing is flipping a sprint car because it hurts.
For fun, just for fun. Yeah.
And so for many years, I needed to prove to myself that I could have been a good race car driver if I could have stayed together with and get that mentally. And Pikes Peak it's not just a race, it's spiritual. Anybody that races there will tell you that. And I worked really hard to see if I could do it, because you're betting, hey, am I betting I'm going to be a good race driver? Well, if I'm a good race driver, I'm going to make it. Or I'm betting my butt. You mess up there, you could die. I remember when I went to the rookie meeting, I was being a smartass, and the guys stand up there. Oh, gentlemen, there's 157 corners you have to navigate to get up here. 12 of those will kill you. And I was just raised my hand. I was like, oh, are those clearly marked? And he was not happy with me. But but you realize, look, I need to take this a little bit more seriously.
You were serious about that.
Yeah,
Got it.
He didn't think that was funny.
No. I thought it was funny.
There. So it was kind of these hot rod redneck guys from North Carolina show up with a 36 Chevy and win Pikes Peak and in our class, and set a record in our class at that time, and rolling down that hill with the people lined up along the fence and high-fiving, and you got this flag, and you're thinking, okay, I'm good now. I'm never going to get a chance, not going to prove, but I know in the right situation I could have done this. And that, it meant a lot. And it was I want to tell you, it was very almost spiritual. Pikes Peak is a spiritual place. It's the greatest thing I've ever done in a race car. I recommend that everybody try it, or at least go see it, because you are truly racing the mountain. And, they talk about all these Indian tribes and whatever, and I'm not getting out on you, but it's like you feel that true respect for the mountain, and when they say the mountain decides, it really does, and then you realize, you're ripping up some of these sections 140, 145 miles an hour, no guardrail, no, and you're like, holy crap, if I don't hit this right, this is going to be pretty big, and but it's amazing. So that was an amazing experience, and there's only 2 natural racetracks in the world, I think, that you can go to and experience that, and Bonneville Salt Flats and Pikes Peak. But it is anybody that's ever done it will tell you, it's more than just a race.
I mean, it's what you just said. It's so mental too. The mentality of having the challenge in front of you, and then during so, like you said, looking around and actually realizing the situation you've put yourself in. But then on top of that, taking a step back, and you so casually glossed over it, we built the Ghost. That is a legendary car. It kind of goes back to the theme of not even realizing the legacy that you're building at the time that you're quite literally building it. What do you remember about building that race car and then showing up at Pikes Peak with it and thinking, okay, here's my Chariot, let's take on the mountain?
Well, we were working it, and people are like, what is, because I remember as a kid, that's what I grew up watching. I love those, the those modifieds, the old coupes and sedans, and always loved 36 Chevy sedan. So we had 36 Chevy sedan, and I was like, well, let's just build a modified. So then that modified, went into a special rear suspension that we designed, full flat body, carbon fiber, under tunnels, diffusers. It's got a huge 377 cubic inch all aluminum SP2 motor in it, about 850 horsepower. It's a pretty cool car. But we took it to Road Atlanta the first time, and they let us run it in with the vintage cars. They didn't even know where to put us, it was my first time really on a road course or Road Atlanta, and I remember it was pretty fast. We finished third or fourth, and I'm like, I shouldn't even be able to keep up with these guys. And then we took it to Daytona, and they put me in with all these Porsches, because they didn't know where to put me, and they told me just be careful, kind of stay out of the way, these cars. It's like, yeah, okay, And I think on the second or third lap of practice, where you come out of the bus stop on the backstretch of Daytona and come down, up on the banking down into turn one. And turn one, they have a little radar deal there. I was going to say about third or fourth lap in practice, it was pretty quick. But we clicked off 196 miles an hour with getting into one there. And then when I hit the garage, people were like, what? Wait a minute. What is that? What's going on? So they let us run. They let us run the race. So we qualified third, finished third. And then we the things also, so it's run Daytona, it's run the road course at Indy, it's run Road Atlanta, it's run VIR. We took it to New Zealand to the hill climb, so it's been over there, Pike's Peak. And, I put Jeff Gordon in it the last time we were at VIR playing around. Jeff and I go up there a good bit, and he said, I don't know if I'm more impressed that you built this or you drive it as fast as you do, because it's a pretty scary car.
That's a compliment coming from Jeff.
Oh yeah, I was a kid. Jeff's opinion of my driving means more to me than anything. He can be if he says wrong, if he says something to me that hurts my feelings, it just crushes me. It's like I get like a little girl. I guess no offense,
Yeah.
but
also because he's being honest with you.
Yeah.
That's the thing, both on the good side and the bad side.
Some days I think he's not. I think he's just busting me.
You think he's just messing with you?
But again, we go and we take a couple days. We take our campers up and we run. He's got a couple of race cars here that we take care of for him, and I've got a couple, and we just go up there and hang out at VIR with our friends. And now we're going to do a lot probably over at the 1010s racetrack as well. But it is really neat because we just sit around and drive when we feel like it and go and talk.
I mentioned earlier listening back to your interview with Dale Jr., mostly because I didn't want to sit you down and then do the exact same interview that you did with Dale. Now, granted, it was a number of years ago now, but back at that time, it was during COVID, and you made a point to say that you're really trying to be intentional about spending the time with family. Mm-hmm. And that's something that even in my less than 10 years that I've spent in the sport, I've learned that lesson. I will say kind of a little bit the hard way sometimes, that if you aren't intentional about making the time to see your family and spend that quality time with them, those seasons go real quick. They go really fast. How is that different now for you? And was there something, I know you mentioned Jeff's kids earlier, you have two wonderful children of your own, a son and a daughter. Now kind of having this time in your life, what's that been like, that mentality shift to be intentional about that family time?
Again, that's part of that evolution. Because again, you don't know how much you don't know. You can always look back and go, I should have done this and should have done that. Well, that just creates guilt that's unnecessary. You've got to learn from it. And when you're running hard to make it, it's hard to keep a true balance, right? Because you're not going to, you can't get to the top of the heap without running hard. Mm-hmm. And that is going to take things away from your family. That, there is some sacrifice and there is some selfishness to accomplish it. But I think if you look back and try and understand, okay, what you're thinking versus what they're thinking, and how you can, you can compromise that. And I did not do a good job of that with Ray J. And I swore, to have a second chance, with Kate, like that we never in a million years thought I was going to have another child at that age, but it's been a blessing because I think it's helped me understand Ray J a lot more. And I can't go back and give him the time that I didn't. He's 34, not 5 now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but I can spend time with him and help him do better in his life. But it is a very, very difficult thing, and I don't know of anyone who's ever been totally successful at it. You just have to keep trying to improve. And there are times that your family does have to just stand back and support you,
Mm-hmm.
because there's no other way. There's no other way that we could have won championship if I wasn't on the road 30 plus times a year, right? Or all the testing. When we first started the Cup Series, there was no restriction in testing. I think everybody's like, oh, it was only 28, 30 races. Yeah, but we tested every week, everywhere. So think about that. That was like we tested at least that many times.
And to your point, to not have the technology that we have today, you, I'm sure, had to do even more on-track, in-person testing just to get the baseline of the notes.
Well, the schedule used to be, right, so let's just say, you go to the racetrack Thursday night, you practice all day Friday, you qualify Friday, you practice twice on Saturday, you race on Sunday. You come back, you undo everything, load everything up, you leave for a test on Tuesday, you test Tuesday and Wednesday. You come back Thursday, unload everything, reload everything, leave Thursday night for the racetrack. It was like that, 30 weeks a year when I first came up to Cup.
Mm-hmm. I will say, having as a child of somebody who was on the same traveling circus schedule that you were on for so many years.
And plus, he was a doctor, too, on top of that. So
Right.
it's like, look.
Very busy. But to
Yeah.
your point, I mean, I'm sure he would probably agree and say a lot of the same things about how he doesn't feel like he balanced it all. But I'll stick my hand up, and I can't speak for Ray J or for Kate, but I don't remember all of the things that my dad missed, but I remember all the breakfasts that he made me, or all the things that he did do. So just know that and keep that in mind, And I think too, like, on top of that, I appreciate even more now. I mentioned to you before we started that I had my family with me at Bristol this weekend, and I can appreciate that even more now. Again, I don't sit there and think about everything my dad missed, but I do get to sit there and listen to every story that he gets to tell me about what he was doing while he wasn't there. And it is really special. So I know that your family appreciates that time. And I will say, though, you had a great partner in having someone who very much understood the racing world, because she's behind the wheel as well. How did that work?
With Erin?
Yeah, with finding that success. And when you've got a competitor with you, backseat driving you all the way to success.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate, right? I've been really fortunate. I've had, 2 ladies in my life that again, my first marriage ended up in divorce, but we always had respect for one another. And Erin and Mary were friends. Ray J's mom passed away about a year ago. So, but it was always a good, respectful relationship. But, Erin and I just, you're on the road, you're talking, things aren't, you don't ever intend for stuff to happen, but then all of a sudden you realize, look, I'm not present here. I'm not here, and there I have an interest here, and and I was pretty honest about everything in the book. How things were going, and because that to me is important. If I was going to write that book, and to tell the truth, because it was more about whether I don't really care if people think I'm right or wrong, but I care about them knowing what I was thinking.
Of course.
Right. So there was just something that, again, like that chemistry, and you would think, let me tell you, Erin and I, we are competitive with one another. We can fight, we can yell and scream, but there's, she brings out some emotion, some, that thing, like I was telling you with Alan, that, that like just fires me up to be better. She's pushed me to be a better father. She's pushed me to be a better husband, better with my friends, better with the people I work with. So she's pushed me to to be, not just Ray Evernham, the crew chief, leave me alone, I'm going to build a car, and that's it, So, I appreciate that because I'm getting to experience things now, even with Ray J, that I wouldn't if she hadn't pushed me.
I have 2 questions from the audience, if you
wow.
will,
Okay.
quickly. First one being from my dad, and he said here, I said, do you have any stories or anything, any dirt you can give me on Ray before I sit down with him? And he said a story about a wet towel with some ammonia on it at Sears Point in Sonoma came to mind. It's okay if it doesn't ring a bell for you, because he said he didn't remember all the details either. So it was kind of one of those like, does Ray? He was like, I remember something about this. Does Ray remember?
Well,
and if not, make it up. I don't know.
No, so Jeff was always in incredible physical condition, always. But for some reason, heat, temperature, and his allergies, like it would affect him. And I think it's because he was very low percentage body fat, right? So then he'd either start to cramp up or he'd get sick. And Jeff, there were a couple times Jeff actually got sick in the car. Like, we're leading the Southern 500. He's throwing up, still wins the race. Like, people forget how Jeff Gordon, they go, what about Jeff Gordon that people don't know? He's tough. Jeff was tough. I've seen Jeff get out of the car with a hole in his hand. He had that thing on his back and just bleed and like throw up in the car and still like win, like he didn't win Darlington throwing up in the car. Well, he did. And, so I think at Sears Point, what Jerry's talking about, every time somebody had a problem on pit road, would get your dad, get Jerry over there. So Jeff was starting to feel sick in the car at Sonoma. We only had to make 2 or 3 pit stops. I forget what it was. And we're like, man, he's not feeling good, whatever he did. So he had us get a towel and wet the towel, cool water, and put some ammonia in it to kind of get Jeff head cleared up. And and I think I think that was Sonoma, but that might have happened more than once.
Okay.
We used to, the July-August time frame was tough for us.
I bet. Wow, to be losing that much fluid in the car and still go on and
let me tell you,
tackle
people
Darlington.
don't really understand. When you look at, he had the most consecutive starts in the history of the sport. That's not by accident. What he had 785 starts consecutively. People talk about Terry, and Terry's Iron Man, and you talk about how tough, Pearson and Yarborough and them guys were. But when you look at that and you think, okay, here's the kid from California wearing the Nike sneakers that actually ends up having the more consecutive starts than anybody. That they just forget how there were plenty of times he somehow just got it done when other people might have got out of the car.
My second question from the audience was the American Graffiti movie poster down there. Is this a favorite movie? Did you have, what's the relationship to that movie?
That movie inspired me. I just love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's the car. I love old cars. I love old rock and roll music. And the 1958 Chevy that's sitting down there is the car from the movie.
Wow.
So when I was 15 years old, I fell in love with that car. And as soon as I started to make some money, I tried to track it down. I tried to buy it for years and finally was able to do that. And then we worked with the folks at DuPont and did a complete restoration on it, identical. Like the guy that I bought it from Lucasfilm. So it came right out of the movie. Still looked the same way. It just was a little bit beat up. But it is now perfect condition. Like paint, interior, the same interior when Candy Clark got in there and said, hey, I love tuck and roll. It's there. The wheels, the tires. It's not the original motor from the movie because the guy that had the car blew that up. But in the movie, he says, I got a 327 with 6 Strombergs. That's got a 327 with 6 Strombergs. So that is the car. We left a dent in the back of it where he backed into the guy in the traffic light. So it's,
wow.
That movie. So I think 1973,
wow.
I was 15 and just fell in love with that movie, fell in love with that car, and that's another one of those things I look down there and go, I cannot believe I got that car, but I got it, and we drive it. We debuted that thing. We debuted that thing at the SEMA show in Vegas the first year, and it was Halloween, and we all dressed up like the characters from the movie. And we're driving around, like, and we're parking in front of a bar, you know, and people are like, oh, you guys all dressed up, you got a replica. We're like, nah, it's not the replica, that's the real one, you
This
know.
is the
And they're like,
real
no, yeah.
deal.
So, yeah, we drove. So we did a little, when I used to do that TV show, Americana, there's a complete show on how we did that car. And they showed driving us around Vegas.
That is quite literally living a childhood dream.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you said, I want to do that, and you made it happen.
Yeah, and Candy Clark,
Wow.
the girl from the movie, we got her out there at Vegas with us, and she was a hoot, and she was at the show, was riding around in the car. She's awesome.
That's incredible. That question came from Brian, by the way. Both Joey and Brian are huge movie nerds. I say that with all the love in the world, movie nerds. That answer was even better than I thought it was going to be.
I've
You
got
agree?
pictures
Yeah.
of that car. You know, they didn't. That was such a low budget movie. They didn't have trailers, so they hung out in that car. I've got pictures of Harrison Ford and Richard Dreyfuss sitting on that car, drinking beer in the back of it. And that was also its own camera car. So they just knocked holes through the doors and ran wires and stuff like that. It's a pretty cool car.
All right, Ray, before I let you go, one final segment. It's called Long Story Short.
Okay.
It's because I'm the queen of saying long story short, and then you're here for another 2 hours. Apologies, I'm my father's daughter. But 3 questions. You can make your answer as long or as short as possible. The floor is yours. Question 1, when was the last time you cried?
Oh, boy. Whew. The last time I cried. Probably over, some family incident involving, Ray J and his mom. That was probably it.
Understandable. Mm-hmm. So question number 2, when was the last time that you remember doing something that you felt an immense amount of pride in what you accomplished?
Last Sunday, or last Saturday, I guess. I'm part of the group, the team with Charlotte Motor Speedway and Hendrick Motorsports and that group that put on the Heritage event. And it's something that's been a vision of Marcus Smith, Mr. Hendrick, and all of the folks that did it. And last Saturday there, we pulled off, I thought, a fantastic show. And it gave me a feeling of being on a great team again. Like there's like a great team with great people, and then you have resources to get it done. And it picked up so much momentum. It's a show that people are talking about. We're going to make some announcements for next year. But last Saturday night, we got kind of the immediate team that I was on together, and we had a drink by my bus, and it was like talking about winning a big race or something, because everybody had worked so hard to do that, and it really got a lot of great replies from the automotive world.
Everything I saw of it looked incredible. Just beautiful, first of all. I mean, the whole facility, the whole event was gorgeous. And then I know how much hard work you guys put into it, and it seemed like it was just an incredible success. So I'm excited to hear what you have to announce moving forward. I won't push you too much, but We are excited to hear. All right, final question. One piece of media, it can be anything, like a song, a podcast, a show, a movie, I don't know, anything that you would recommend for our viewers to check out.
Oh, wow. I listen to so many podcasts. And
do you really?
I do.
That made my heart so
everything
happy.
Everything from psychological, management to, again, marriage, all those things.
That's that growth mindset.
I really feel like practice what you preach, right? So I used to tell everybody, look, when you look in the mirror in the morning and you look in the mirror at night before you go to bed, you should know something more than the guy that you looked at in the mirror in the morning. And that doesn't mean that it has to be something valuable. It just means that, like, you should be somehow, I hate to use the term better, but somehow better, smarter. You should have improved. So I listen to a lot of things. I think my book's pretty interesting. That's a selfless plug.
Plug it, baby. Plug it. No, please do.
But,
please.
The book, I will tell you honestly, the book that changed my life was Pat Riley's book, The Winner Within. I read that book in the early 90s, and I basically built the 24 team off of that book. And it's old. It's about, it's really about how to be a team player or not a team player. And so probably who even knows? But I mean, Riley was one of the greatest basketball coaches ever. And so that book honestly really changed my life. And I read a lot about Native Americans and the spirituality of how they handle stuff. I just feel like it's calmed me down a lot. Again, thinking more about connectivity to things rather than trying to fight things all the time.
That's an incredible mindset. I can't commend you enough for having that mindset, truly.
Well, it's taken me 68 years. So.
Well, hey, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. Yeah. To have it is admirable. Quickly, I can't believe I didn't ask this sooner, and I think I meant to when we started talking about something else important, though. Can you believe we're racing at Rockingham this weekend?
I think that's fantastic. And I hope Casey Kane does great. He always ran good at Rockingham, almost won his first race there for me, got second, I think, to Matt Kenseth. But love Rockingham, to watch a race there. When they used to come down a straightaway and split, like up top, down bottom. I think Jeff and I won 5 times. We have 5 wins at Rockingham. Mm-hmm. And love that place. And I just think it's going to be a great race, truck wise, Xfinity wise, and maybe some days the Cup cars will go back there. But what a treat to see that place come back.
Ray is just another incredible example of how this sport is filled with some of the most intelligent, hardworking, passionate, successful people that I've ever met. But on top of that, just the best people that I've ever met. Genuinely good people. I mean, before we started shooting, Ray and I were chatting briefly about how I love hats and I collect them or what have you. So when we wrapped, he comes back into the room and he brought me this hat. He's like, yeah, we have, tons of boxes in the back of just old memorabilia and things. I've got so many hats and things in there, and I got you this one. Hello? I can't tell you how much that means to me. I mean, that means the generosity, the kindness is just unreal. So Ray, thank you, not only for the time, but for the kindness, truly. And he also brought me a copy of his book. I can't wait to read it. You can get yourself a copy too. It's called Trophies and Scars. You can buy it on Amazon or you can buy it on Ray's website. I am really excited to start reading this. I think I'm actually going to start tonight because I have a red-eye flight to catch after this to cover some modifieds tomorrow night at Thompson Speedway. So I got a date with this book and American Airlines. So I'm going to run, but be sure you are following us on Instagram at Rollin.Punches. Also, be sure you're subscribed to our YouTube page. And I also just remembered that I didn't mention that we're racing at Rockingham this weekend. And that's kind of a big deal. Kind of a huge deal that we're racing at Rockingham this weekend. Hello? And kind of cool, too, that it worked out that I talked to Ray this week. Anyways, that's my ADD kicking in. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at Rollin.Punches. Subscribe to our YouTube page. And if TikTok's your jam, come hang out with us on TikTok. We're over there too. All right. Have an incredible weekend. I love you so much. Mom, thank you for listening. I love you so much. And to send all of y'all off into the weekend, in the wise words of my mother, don't be a dumbass, okay? Love ya. Bye.